have been documented.
And Noor, what are we to make of what Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was saying? We heard it just a few moments ago, effectively framing this as a war for the people of Iran. I mean, how will that message land, do you think, coming from the Prime Minister of Israel?
Well, I mean, first of all, the message was in Hebrew, so, I'm not sure how many Iranians would have understood it. But this is part of the narrative that that Benjamin Netanyahu and the Israeli government is attempting to create, that this is not a war against Iranians, that even the sanctions that, Israel had asked the U.S. not to lift, even in the context of negotiations, that even those sanctions were targeting ordinary Iranians, even though it had crippled their economy, that idea that Israel can foment discord in Iran, encourage Iranians to rise up against the government, is all part of the policy, declared policy in Israel, that the Iranian government must go. And that is why it is not making any secret that the initial attacks, the initial strikes this morning targeted senior Iranian officials. In the words of one unnamed source that was widely reported in Israeli media, Israel is targeting current, former and future Iranian officials.
No, many thanks. Al Jazeera's Noor O'Day reporting live from Ramallah in the occupied West Bank. Iran's also launched strikes on U.S. assets right across the Middle East region. This was the moment a missile hit the center for the U.S. Fifth Fleet headquarters in Bahrain's capital. Explosions and interceptions have also been reported in countries including Qatar, the UAE, Iraq and Jordan. One person has reported to have been killed in Abu Dhabi. Well, Qatar's foreign ministry has released a statement. It says the state of Qatar expresses its strongest condemnation of the targeting of Qatari territories with Iranian ballistic missiles, considering it a flagrant violation of its national sovereignty, a direct assault on its security and the safety of its lands, and an unacceptable escalation that threatens the security and stability of the region. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs affirms that the state of Qatar reserves its full right to respond to this targeting in accordance with the provisions of international law and in proportion to the nature of the aggression, in defense of its sovereignty and to safeguard its security and national interests. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs emphasizes that the state of Qatar has been and remains among the first to call for dialogue with the Islamic Republic of Iran and has advocated for continuing on this principle as the optimal foundation for addressing differences and resolving disputes through peaceful means, thereby sparing the region the risks of escalation. Al Jazeera's Zain Basrawi is live for us here in Doha. Zain, it's been quiet for the last 30 minutes or so, but once again, we've had a series of loud booms that have come almost in waves for the last 5 or 6 hours over Qatar. What's happening right now?
That is correct. Every hour on the hour since it began this morning, we've heard these waves of explosions, and they've been escalating. The majority of them have been interceptions, and Qatar continues to say that it has successfully combated wave after wave with its defensive weapons, Iranian strikes. It's combated these wave after waves of strikes coming in. We've seen them escalate from 3 or 4 at the top of every hour to happening multiple times in an hour and going from 3 to 4 to about 6, 7, sometimes 8. And we've seen those interceptions happening in the skies over our position here. You see those coming in and being intercepted and smoke clouds forming where the explosions happen. As the night began to come, those explosions became much more clear. We very clearly saw the interceptions taking place, the bright fireball of explosions in the sky. And it has to be said that these interceptions, while they are successful, they're happening over civilian populated areas. Doha is not very big. The majority of the 3 million people in Qatar live here in Doha, about 2.3 million. And the debris that's been falling has been affecting different parts of the city. Earlier today, or in the earlier part of the day, we saw what happened in Barwa village, where what looked to be the fuel can of one of the missiles fell into a compound of apartments. There was a fireball and smoke and a great deal of panic that came from that ambulances on the scene. So the debris fall, even though these interceptions are happening, the debris fall that is happening still represents a danger to the residents of the city.
Several times throughout the day, anyone who lives in Qatar, our mobile phones screamed at us. We had these national alerts. I mean, how are people feeling? I mean, the roads were still busy despite people being urged to shelter in place.
That is correct. There is a certain incongruency to this kind of violence happening in a place that is traditionally very safe. Now, that's not entirely true. Last year, we saw attacks by Iran in retaliation for U.S. strikes on its nuclear sites in concert with Israel. We saw Israel attack the Hamas offices during negotiations. In June and September, those incidents did happen. So people have become familiar with this kind of thing. But what seems to be happening is that people do realize that what Iran is trying to hit, and we've seen this consistently with the trajectory of the missiles that have been intercepted, they are trying to hit Al Udeid Air Base. They're trying to hit U.S. assets. People here know that the civilian populated areas aren't necessarily the target.
Interest, but hopefully the gallery will be open shortly.
Anything exciting?
Blackmail in Fairfax, the game Altarpiece, the Tomb of Anubis.
I thought that was at the...
Go in it!
Time bomb set.
And I said over and over again, it will target U.S. assets in the Gulf countries that are neighboring. And that is largely what people are expecting to have happen. But there is very little doubt that people here are rattled. Those that we've been talking to say that the explosions are loud, they are unfamiliar, even if they are outgoing defensive fire that represent less of a threat. It is unfamiliar to the residents of what has largely been a peaceful place to live. So there is a great deal of nervousness and tension among those that live here with this ongoing fire that's been going on all day. And if the force of the U.S. are to be believed, this is just the first day of something that's going to carry on for a week, maybe longer.
Time to make my
Al
move.
Jazeera's Zain Basradi live from Doha. Many thanks indeed, Zain. Other countries in the region have reacted to Iran's attacks. Jordan has called for an immediate halt to military escalation, but said it would defend the kingdom's interests, quote, with all its might. Kuwait said it reserves the right to defend itself following Iranian attacks there. And Saudi Arabia said the kingdom condemns and denounces in the strongest terms the blatant Iranian aggression, warning of what it calls grave consequences if violations of state sovereignty continue. We're going to have a discussion now with three guests. Fawad Azadi is professor at the University of Tehran, Faculty of World Studies, who joins us live from Tehran. Mark Kinnard is a retired American general and a former Assistant Secretary for Political and Military Affairs. He joins us from Washington, D.C. And Paul Musgrave is Associate Professor of Government at Georgetown University here in Qatar. Fawad Azadi, let's begin with you. What are your thoughts on why? Why now? What has happened? The last time you and I spoke, I mean, just, 2 days ago, we were discussing the positive mood music around the talks in Geneva, which apparently both sides agreed were going reasonably well. And then we hear that President Trump decides he's not very happy. 24 hours later, we get these military strikes. What's happened?
You know, we became even more encouraged last night after we saw the interview of the Omani Prime Minister with CBS News, the American news channel, saying that an agreement is available within 24 hours. He said that it could happen by tomorrow, which is today. He said that last night. And he said that the Iranian side has given concessions that they were not available to give in 2015. So Iran wanted to avoid what we see today. The United States wanted to avoid diplomacy because they want to do regime change. This is what Trump said. This is what Netanyahu said. And if you want to do regime change, you don't reach an agreement with the regime you want to change. And that's why they attacked today. In the morning, we had explosions. I went to my daughter's school. We had to pick them up because the school was closing. As you know, we lost 70 school children, young girls today because of these illegal American-Israeli attacks.
Mark Kimmett, does launching strikes in the middle of ongoing negotiations risk confirming the argument that Iran's been putting forward for a while, that the United States simply cannot be trusted to negotiate in good faith?
Well, I would recharacterize it. You're discussing what has been announced as positive and moving forward. Look, we understood that was simply happy talk coming out of the Iranians and the negotiators for the simple reason, the mediators, for the simple reason that they were trying to prepare the narrative what we're hearing now. Fact is, you did not hear the Americans say anything. It's clear that the Americans were constantly rebuffed at the negotiating table. The Americans gave up the issue of ballistic missiles. The Americans gave up the issue of proxies, and then it became very apparent that the Iranians were going to dig in. For some reason, it seems that they pulled the wrong playbook off the shelf. They pulled the 2016 Obama playbook off the shelf, which says delay, deny, deceive. The Americans want a deal. They're not prepared to do anything. So I think those who have been looking at this from a sober mind understood that the Iranians had a choice. They could either negotiate or they would face military pressure. They failed to negotiate. They demonstrated they're unwilling to move on the key issues of the negotiations. And unfortunately, because of that, Iran has brought their people into this war.
Paul Musgrave, under international law, preemptive self-defense usually requires some sort of imminent threat. I mean, was that threshold clearly met here?
You know, I would not say it's been clearly met. I don't have access to the intelligence of the Israelis or the Americans would be claiming, but it's hard to see what has changed from this week to last week. The talks publicly, the Omanis were saying the talks are going well, but it's difficult to imagine that the Iranians were planning to launch an offensive that would justify this sort of attack by the Americans and the Israelis. And this is an attack that took almost everybody by surprise. I'm sure you, like me, have been checking social media in the middle of the night because we're accustomed to these sorts of crises unfolding overnight. But this, the timing, everything just felt very off. So that claim about a preventative war also sits very poorly with President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu's elaboration of the goals as being regime change, which really just seems to, not say that there was an imminent threat, but rather some sort of a target of opportunity or that some countdown had run out.
Fouad Izzadi, would you agree with that? That this is not about Iran's nuclear program at all. It's about regime change.
Explosives planted.
This is what they said. They couldn't be any more specific. Trump said it, Netanyahu said it. They have been telling Iranians that they need to change Iran's government. It was the United States government that changed Iran's government in 1953 through a coup. They want to change Iran's government through these military strikes. They were successful in 1953. They are not going to be successful in 2026. There is this popular resistance here. You're going to see a rally around flag effect. Last time they attacked Iran, Iranians were more united than before. I was watching people on the streets shouting against Trump and Netanyahu. You're going to see millions of people coming to the streets in a matter of 24 hours, 48 hours, opposing their country to be attacked by genocidal regime. These are the people who engaged in a genocide in Gaza. They want to have Tehran look like Gaza. They're not going to be able to do that. Iran has defense capabilities that will defend the country. There are going to be many American soldiers who will get killed, unfortunately. Iran didn't want this. Iran didn't want to have war. Iran doesn't want to fight two nuclear regimes. Unfortunately, this is the situation we have. Sober minds don't engage in genocide, don't engage in this type of criminal behavior.
Mark, what do you make of that the US and Israel want Tehran to look like Gaza? How far are the US and Israel prepared to go? How long will those of us who live in cities like Doha and Abu Dhabi, in Riyadh, in Kuwait, be under the threat of missile attack?
Well, first of all, let's go back to the point that my friend Fouad was making. The United States is not seeking to conduct regime change. If it has taken out key leaders, that's leadership targeting. The regime change will not come from the American 82nd Airborne parachuting into Tehran. And it's going to come from inside the country, from internal opposition to the regime. And now with the key leaders, such as the RGC commander and perhaps some political leaders, that there is a vacuum, a leadership vacuum would be created that could either be filled by the people of Iran, or if the law is correct, it will simply see leaders replaced and the Iranian regime will continue. The United States not only does not want to conduct regime change, it doesn't have the capability. We're not going to put boots on the ground. On the other hand, there is a window of opportunity here provided by the West that says, okay, you've taken out the top level of leadership. This is what you have been protesting about. If you want to fill that vacuum with a different type of government, we have provided the opportunity. We have set the table for you. On the other hand, if you want to maintain the status quo, to maintain the status quo. But this will not be a decision made by America or Israel. It will be made by the people of Iran, and we will see what the people of Iran choose.
Mark, if major powers like the US and Israel claim the right to strike countries over potential future threats, what happens to the rules-based international order? Was there any attempt to seek international legitimacy for these strikes, or do the US and Israel simply not care?
You can characterize it in terms that start, but the fact remains is that the international community was fully aware that the United States was prepared to use military force if the imminent threat of a continued enrichment program, illegal enrichment program by Iran to develop a nuclear capability. At what point does it go from being a concept to an imminent threat? So I understand your point about international law. I think that there would be many that disagree with it. But it is clear that we should now understand where we are and focus on what happens next.
Paul, who gets to decide what
could change
counts as an imminent threat?
Certainly
in the nuclear context, intelligence agencies or politicians like President Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu?
Well, this is a fundamentally political decision. It's one that has to be communicated, and it's one that has to be accepted by an international audience. And we have seen countries around the world, the global north, countries like the UK, France, and others, line up to condemn the Iranian disputes. We've also obviously seen countries that condemn what the United States and Israel are doing. So this is something where international law, there's sometimes courts, there's other things, but customary public law that has to be communicated. I think that what really matters here is the degree to which the Trump administration's public discussions and the Israeli government's public discussions of their aims get muddled here. Was this about Iran's ballistic missile capability? Was this about the nuclear weapons program? Was this about the protests? Saying that you're doing it for any one of these reasons has a very different justification, a very different political implication. And saying that we're going to remove the top layer of leadership and then let the Iranian people do what comes naturally, that really runs the risk from the U.S. and Israel's point of view that what comes next could be much worse, because the existing power structure in Iran is much more revolutionary, literally, than the incumbent leadership.
Brian, what do you make of what you just heard there? Where do you see this going? Is there an off-ramp for Iran?
I think what will happen is that even if the United States is able to kill illegally Iranian leaders, the next generation of Iranians, the Iranians that did not see American atrocities in Iran before 1970, some Iranians that did not understand why their parents and grandparents were anti-American, those Iranians will take over. Now they understand why American government is a imperialist, vicious government, and a government that attacks other countries and kills little children. They understand they're fighting the Epstein class that either rape little girls or bomb little girls. this is the government that we are witnessing. They're going to fight back against that government, and they're going to ensure that the Islamic Republic of Iran will live many years after America destroyed it.
Mark Kibbett has had to leave us. Gentlemen, many thanks indeed. Forward we're getting reports
I lead by example.
a long-range early warning radar in northern Qatar. Sources told Al Jazeera that no injuries have been reported in the targeting of the early warning radar. We are assessing the material damage. So we'll bring you more on that as and when we get it. In the meantime, Britain's Prime Minister Keir Starmer says that British forces and planes were taking part in coordinated efforts to protect the country's interests and allies.
Iran can end this now. They should refrain from further strikes, give up their weapons programs, and cease the appalling violence and repression against the Iranian people, who deserve the right to determine their own future, in line with our long-standing position.
I don't have time
This
to
is
play
the route
fair.
to de-escalation.
Can't wait.
Negotiations.
Let's take you right out of Berlin. Al Jazeera's Dominic Kane can tell us more about how other European nations, Germany, have reacted to today's developments. Dominic?
Well, certainly we know that the E3, that's three European countries, France, Germany, the United Kingdom, who previously were in negotiations with Iran going back many years, trying to bring about a peaceful end to its nuclear program. They put out a joint statement in which they called for Iran to end its nuclear program, to curb its ballistic missile program, to refrain from what they call its destabilizing activities in the region, and to cease its repressive actions against its own people. They said they did not take part in these strikes, but they are in close cooperation and consultation with Iran, with Israel and with the United States and other regional partners. They're also making clear that they say that they believe the Iranian government should return to the negotiating table. Point to make here also is that we know that the French President Emmanuel Macron has called an emergency cabinet meeting which will be taking place in the course of the next hour and a half to discuss security and defense issues. We know also that President Macron called for a meeting of the United Nations Security Council. We believe that will take place later on, perhaps 21 GMT. Here in Germany, we know that Chancellor Merz has said he has spoken to the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. The view very much coming from the governments of those two countries is to try to bring back an end to what's taking place, with no condemnation of what the Israeli or American United States governments have done, condemning what the Iranian government has done. One final thought in Madrid, a discordant thought. The Spanish Prime Minister there condemning both the actions of the United States and Israel and of Iran, which differentiates his government from the three I was talking about.
Dominic Kane, live in Berlin. Many thanks indeed, Dominic. In Moscow is Dmitry Medvedenko, who can tell us more, Dmitry, about what Russia has been saying about today.
Story time.
Russia has just convened, together with Beijing, the emergency meeting of the UN Security Council. As Dominic mentioned just a second ago, it's going to happen around 21 GMT or midnight Moscow or Doha time. But we have to remember that, of course, Russia, China, and the US, three parties out of several countries which are permanent members of the UN Security Council. We have a veto rights. Therefore, any resolution condemning or supporting US action in Iran is likely to be met with a veto. So Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi earlier spoke on the phone with his Russian counterpart Sergei Lavrov, where they discussed the situation, and Russia pledged assurances that it will support Iran in trying to pursue a peaceful resolution to this crisis, including at the UN Security Council. And we've heard from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in their statement, they called the attacks on Iran reckless, unprovoked, premeditated, and said that Washington and Tel Aviv bear full responsibility for any consequences of this man-made crisis. And let me just read one line to you from that statement. By plunging the Middle East into the abyss of uncontrolled escalation, they're effectively promoting countries across the globe, including the Middle East, to pursue even more grave means of countering emerging threats, stopping short of, saying, nuclear weapons.
Al Jazeera's Dmitry Medvedenko reporting live from Moscow. I want to go back to Berlin and to Dominic. Dominic, what do people there in Germany think about these attacks on Iran?
If I get too greedy, I could get caught.
Well, the thing to say, Adrian, is that over the course of the past few hours, in at least 2 different German cities, there have been demonstrations taking place. Has to be said, demonstrations that had already been planned prior to what has been unfolding over the course of the last many hours today. And yet, at those protests and demonstrations, they predominantly be by people who are opposed to the government in Iran. They've been brandishing the flags of pre-revolutionary Iran. Here in Berlin, one very loud, raucous demonstration was going past our building. It is actually, as I look off camera, I can see them walking through the city near to where our bureau is. So no question that those who oppose the government in Iran here in Germany, they'd planned these demonstrations. They clearly didn't know what was about to happen, and yet they seem to be welcoming it. Certainly that's the view amongst those, as I say, who are taking part in those demonstrations.
All right, Dominic, many thanks indeed. The US strikes on Iran are being carried out from air and sea in cooperation with Israel. According to a US official speaking to Al Jazeera, the strikes on Iran will continue for the coming days. The official says it is an extensive air and sea campaign against Iran. The objectives are broad and tangible, will include strikes across the country. Dismantling Iranian security forces is the main purpose of the strikes. Al Jazeera's senior political analyst is Marwan Bashara. He's with us now live from here in Doha. I've been looking forward to this moment to get your thoughts on all of this. I know that you were predicting that this was going to happen. Was it, though, avoidable or inevitable?
Is under attack.
Well, now, after the fact, we probably should say inevitable, because clearly the negotiations this time and the last time back in June last year were a window dressing. Clearly, the United States was involved in the negotiations and only to buy time to prepare for the attack along with Israel. They needed time to deploy the USS Ford, apparently, and the other Armada parts in the region, and hence they were involved in negotiations to see what's what. My sense is that the war was launched this weekend not because there was a breakdown in the negotiations, rather because there was a breakthrough in the negotiations. Because when the negotiations are only meant to be window dressing, and they sort of start to work with the mediator, Oman, in this case, saying, wow, we have some real progress because the Iranians have come up with some serious economic proposals in addition to the nuclear proposals, something that really put the American delegation under pressure. And that's what the United States and Israel decided to do.
So how far are the United States and Israel going to push this? Is this now not just about Iran's nuclear program, but about regime change?
Well, you see, this is the thing, right? We would have said that the nature of the operation will decide, of course, its objective. If it was limited operation, then it would be meant to bring back the humiliated Iranians to the negotiation table with more speeding up. But if it is the type of operations we've heard about earlier this morning from President Trump, 8.5+ minutes of diatribe against the Iranian regime and all the evil it has committed and so on and so forth, and asking the Iranian people to rise against it, then clearly we're talking about
Story time.
direct or indirect. And here, of course, this is what is the most puzzling, Adrian. You and I and others have spoken over the past good number of years about American involvement in the Middle East, and everyone has, in the United States, we talked about some of the earlier guests, regretted the Iraq war back in 2003. It seems President Trump is borrowing not a page, not 2 pages, not 5 pages, not a chapter. He's borrowing the entire book, the entire playbook of the Bush administrations that it used in the war against Iraq in his war against Iran. The pretexts, the missiles, the liberal intervention, the Russian crowd, imminent danger, the threat against its own people, the threat against the region and regional stability. All the excuses been used again. But it was Trump who said he will end the forever wars. It was Trump who dumped non-stop on the Bush administrations for its war on Iraq. And now he's repeating exactly the same disasters we've seen back in 2003, 2014. Meaning all these years, a total disaster that cost the Americans thousands of American soldiers, trillions of dollars, and of course, was incredibly tragic to the people of Iraq. Is it being repeated in Iran again?
And I know that you're going to sound a cynical note here when I ask you about, and as we speak, I don't know whether you can hear it, but there are more booms above our heads. What it means for the international rules-based order. There was obviously no attempt to seek any form of international legitimacy through the UN Security Council, the IAEA, even Congress wasn't informed. Does that matter to Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu?
It is quite extraordinary. There's no doubt about that. We were just talking about Bush. Bush, regardless, how history judged him, at the end of the day, he was involved in all kinds of debates and discussions. He tried Congress, he argued with the Europeans. A lot of them didn't listen. And he tried the UN Security Council. If you remember, Powell, General then Secretary of State Powell collected information showing these apparently fake news about Iranian Iraqi nuclear program and so on and so forth. Here you have an American president and Israeli prime ministers who are basically implementing Netanyahu and memory because we keep our conversations only in the present. It was in 1996, that 30 years ago exactly, that Netanyahu shared, along with American neoconservatives, this clean break. And the clean break was how to break out of the peace process and involved in the kind of hegemonic wars in the Middle East. That was the 1996 clean break that later on became the project for the new American century. In that playbook, Netanyahu tells his American counterparts, no. The most dangerous country in the Middle East is not Iraq, it's not Syria, it's what? So this has been in the making for a long time, and the next thing they're paying attention to is international law, or so-called international rules-based order, or what have you. This is a hegemonic imperial war that is meant for regime change in Iran. The thing is, this is not an accusation or criticism. This is something being admitted. Netanyahu just talked about regime change in Iran. President Trump, throughout his 8+ minutes, talked extensively about destroying the Iranian Navy, about bombing this and that and the other place, and calling on the Iranian people to rise against the regime. When we saw Bush back in 1990, 91, call on the Iraqis to rise against the Saddam regime, we saw what happened to them. The United States, of course, neglected them. Saddam Hussein killed countless number of them. We're probably going to see something similar to the in Iran.
Al Jazeera's senior political analyst.
Stopping.
Many thanks indeed. Assad is in Iran's earlier when ongoing strikes.
massive explosions are being heard after initiation of a campaign strikes by the American and Israelis Pastor neighborhood, which is one of the most important political areas in Iran, has been for several times targeted alongside with other military areas that are reportedly targeted as well. And that doesn't stop there, as you know that there are other places across the other cities that have been also targeted. This is not the first time that Iranians are facing a confrontation, specifically back in June, when the country was in the middle of negotiations and a campaign of strikes by the Americans and Israelis targeted not just nuclear facilities and nuclear scientists and not just the military headquarters, but actually the civilian structures, living fatalities. And right now, as we speak to people, there is a lot of concern regarding the possibility of escalation, not just here in the capital, but also across the country. And now, this is a very critical situation, because what we are hearing from the Iranian side is that there are going to be a crushing response ahead when it comes to actually preparations of the military response from Tehran side. This is a developing story, and we are closely following to see what comes next. And still, I can hear sounds of explosion here in the downtown.
Mohamed El-Nasri is professor at the Doha High Institute for Graduate Studies. He's been now in the studio. You were listening to what Marwan Bashar was saying a few moments ago. I was going to begin by asking you once again what failed on the diplomatic track, the talks. There was such good mood music. People were hearing that the talks were going well, and then suddenly this, and Marwan was saying it wasn't because anything failed, because things were actually going too well for President Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu. What do you think of that?
Yeah, well, I agree with that. I said something similar, probably not as articulately as Marwan did, but I said something similar in an earlier interview. Very much, I think that the United States and Israel have been planning this and fully intending to carry out this attack for some time. I think their minds were made up, and the negotiations were just kind of smoke screen, some distraction, and a delay tactic to kind of get the military assets into the region and the border. So I very much agree with what Marwan said.
So it is the strikes that we've seen throughout the day on Sunday. Is it about the nuclear program, Iran's nuclear program, destroying its capabilities and its arsenal of missiles, or is it about regime change now, do you think?
There's no question that it's about regime change. If this were about the nuclear program, then the United States would take the negotiation process more seriously. We should remind everyone that there was an agreement already in place, the JCPOA, and Iran had abided by the terms. They did not see a nuclear weapon during that time. There was regular monitoring, and it was the United States under Donald Trump during his first term in office that unilaterally canceled that agreement. So it can't really be about the nuclear program. This is about regime change, and it's a regime change operation that Israel wants, and Israel has sought, not for years, but for decades.
Which begs the question, who's driving U.S. foreign policy at the moment? Is it hawks within the administration? Is it the president himself? Or is it Benjamin Netanyahu?
Well, they're all aligned. I mean, the hawks and Trump and Netanyahu are all aligned. But I would refer people to the classic book that was written about 20 years ago by Mearsheimer and Walt about the power of the Israel lobby inside the United States. Israel lobby controls much of American foreign policy. So I think the answer is in that academic text.
And you talk about this being about regime change, but you can't just remove Ayatollah Khamenei. this is going to be long and protracted, isn't it? And when President Trump warns the nation that American servicemen may be lost in this operation, it's going to take some time. Will we see American boots on the ground?
I don't think we're going to see American boots on the ground, and I think this is an operation that's doomed to failure. I do not see a path forward to regime change, certainly not a quick path forward. But the U.S. operates with this kind of very chaotic foreign policy, and they don't seem to learn lessons very well. Marwan was speaking about the disaster of Iraq, but even if we look at Iran, and one of the earlier guests was reminding all of us that in 1963, the U.S. then, in tandem with the British, carried out a military coup, or an inside job coup in Iran against the first democratically elected prime minister in the country's history, Mohammed Khashoggi. What they did at the time was they funded protests. That's why I say it was an inside job. They funded protests. They paid thugs. They bribed officials. Right. This is what they did. They tried to create chaos on the ground and then hope that people kind of finish the job on the ground. And that's what Netanyahu and Trump were speaking to in their remarks. And that's what their hope is this time around.
What does this mean for the region, Iran's neighborhood? People like you and I living in Doha, where we've been hearing throughout the day these booms as Iranian missiles have been intercepted. What does it mean for the region?
I mean, it's a very dangerous moment. There's no question about that, because the longer this goes on, there is greater risk of looping other actors in. So one of the questions on my mind is, will the Gulf states at some point say to the United States, okay, you can use our bases to launch attacks against Iran? Is that a possibility? And if that happens, then I think it's going to be obviously more protracted and much more violent. But I think, unfortunately, there are unstable and uncertain days ahead.
Always good to talk to you, Professor. Many thanks indeed for being with us. Thank you. That's Mohammed Al-Masri.
Gathering time.
Rashid Al-Mohammed, Center for International Policy Research. He says the Iranian military action seemed like it has that a breach of regional security.
Good job.
The attack on June, there was apparent, enough heads up before the attack happened. This one came at a surprise and shock to us in Qatar and to the Qatari government, and it came, as waves, not as a single attack.
Headed to Broadway.
And I think until now, Qatar has been one of the most targeted states out of all of the other Arab states targeted by Iran. I think the decision makers in Iran don't understand how potentially damaging this is, not just for Qatari-Iranian relations, but also to Arab-Iranian
Feel free to give up anytime.
It's a Qatari base. We have defense and security relationships with multiple states, not only the U.S. And I think all Gulf states made it very clear that no strikes will come out of those states. And we can see that in this information that most of the strikes are the U.S. and Israel in different vectors, not including the Gulf states. And I think what will be read now is that this is, and has been in the statements we've read from all the Gulf states, that this is an attack on Qatari and Gulf sovereignty.
You're watching our continuing coverage of the joint Israeli and US attacks on Iran. I'm Tom McRae. We're just going to bring you up to date with the latest developments. Tehran is retaliating by launching a wave of strikes assets across the Gulf region. The Israeli military says it has struck dozens of military targets across Iran, warning that attacks will continue as required. Iranian authorities say a strike on a girls' primary school in the south has killed at least 86 people. It was one of the numerous strikes Israel and the US launched. Iran has closed its airspace and cut mobile phone services. It has also vowed that its response to the attack will be, quote, crushing. And this is all happening just days after representatives from Tehran and Washington held indirect negotiations in Geneva. Aside from the capital, Tehran, several other cities have also come under attack, including the Shia holy city of Qom, Karachi near the capital, Isfahan in central Iran, Tabriz in the northwest, and Kermanshah, Marib and Alam, both in the west towards the border with Iraq. Shiraz in the south was also hit, and a base near Damavand as well. And as we mentioned earlier, a girls' school in the south in Menard County. The satellite image captured by Airbus Defence and Space by the New York Times has revealed what appears to be significant destruction at the office of Iran's Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei in Tehran. Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi has been speaking to US media. He says that as far as he knows, the country's Supreme Leader and President are still alive. The US President Donald Trump called on Iranians to take over their government when he announced the attack.
To the great, proud people of Iran, I say tonight that the hour of your freedom is at hand. Stay sheltered, don't leave your home. It's very dangerous outside. Bombs will be dropping everywhere. When we are finished, take over your government. It will be yours to take. This will be probably your only chance in generations.
We have correspondents standing by in Tehran, Washington, D.C., Ramallah in the occupied West Bank, Doha, Moscow and Berlin. But first, this report from Perry Wilton.
Among the first victims of the attack by Israel and the US on Iran were here at a girls' primary school in southern Iran. People had to dig through the debris to search for survivors next to what appears to be a school backdrop. In Tehran, the strikes hit some of Iran's most important sites, including the Ministry of Defense, the Atomic Energy Organization, and the Persian military complex. Strikes also hit some of the offices of the Supreme Leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. Israel has said it is targeting dozens of military sites in Iran in coordination with the United States. President Donald Trump said the U.S. will destroy Iran's nuclear and missile programs.
The United States military is undertaking a massive and ongoing operation to prevent this very wicked, radical dictatorship from threatening America and our core national security interests. We are going to destroy their missiles and raise their missile industry to the ground. Will be totally, again, obliterated.
Trump has repeatedly accused Iran of attempting to rebuild its nuclear program, saying Tehran must never be allowed to develop a nuclear weapon. Iran has stood by its nuclear program, saying it was always for civilian purposes. Trump also called on Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard to lay down their arms. Inside Iran, hospitals are placed on high alert with ambulances dispatched from across the country. The attacks come despite representatives from Washington and Tehran holding indirect negotiations in Geneva this week.
You gotta learn to respect
As Iran's retaliatory strikes aim for US targets in neighboring countries, the region is facing fears it could be dragged into a wider, longer conflict. Perry Wilton, Al Jazeera.
Iran has launched a wave of retaliatory airstrikes towards Israel. Sirens have been sounding across the country with citizens warned to take shelter. The Israeli military says air defense systems are working to intercept the missiles. Now, these are images from the city of Haifa in northern Israel, where some missiles have made impact. Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz has declared a state of emergency right across the country, warning the public of Iranian missile and drone attacks. But Iran's foreign minister has been speaking to US media. Abbas Araghchi has acknowledged that Iran may have lost a few commanders, but that it wasn't, quote, such a big problem. He also went on to say, we are not giving up our right, including for enrichment. We are interested in de-escalation. The attacks should stop first, and then there is the possibility. To defend ourselves. Araghchi also spoke about previous US efforts, saying they failed.
They have tried
regime change. This is not the first time that they want to do regime change. They have tried in the past. In the past 47 years, the United States has tried everything from coup, from sanctions, 8 years of war by Saddam Hussein, supported by the United States and many others, and then 12-day war, snapback, in the Security Council, and terrorist operations. They have tried everything, and all of them failed.
I'm going to go straight to Mohammed Val now, who is live for us in Tehran. And Mohammed, obviously, it's been a huge day there right across Iran. How are people dealing and reacting to what has happened?
Well, Tom, people are staying in their homes mostly. We have seen some traffic chaos in the morning, and that was an indication of people taken aback by the incident or the action, the action that has taken place, and trying to reach safe areas. But now the streets are almost empty. There is still some traffic in the streets. The lights are on behind me across the city of Tehran. So there is a semblance of normalcy, but there is a lot of apprehension, and there is in the air fear of renewed attacks on the city of Tehran. Reports from the government side telling people that one of the major concerns, apparently that's not the wording, but I'm interpreting the major concern now on the part of the government is that some kind of unwanted action might be taken or happen in the streets. So I have here this message from the prosecutor, the attorney general of the country, gave a special order to prosecutors across the country to keep special supervision over preventing opportunistic individuals from exploiting wartime conditions. This is the latest message in a series of warnings today from the government to people in the streets and across the country to keep an eye on those who are trying to exploit the situation and probably do some acts that might compromise the security of the nation. Aside from this, only messages of reassurance from the government that the situation is under control, that the streets are open, people can move to wherever they want, and they shouldn't panic, they shouldn't try to stockpile on provisions because there is enough of that in supermarkets, and the banks are still working, that the government institutions will continue to work. But at the same time, measures are taken. The state of war, obviously, the country is not pulling any punches this time around. The government is saying that this will be a different reaction, a different campaign to whatever we have seen before.
This is impressive, well
against American targets and Israeli targets across the region. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard talking about at least 200 soldiers killed or wounded in military bases across the region. 14 of those bases.
Now that's a job well done.
And also new waves of drones and airstrikes with missiles on targets in Israel specifically.
Okay, thank you so much for all of that, Mohammed, for us. As Mohammed was saying, Iran has launched strikes right across the Gulf region. These are the latest pictures that are coming into our newsroom from Dubai. The Dubai media office says that at least 4 individuals were injured, believed to be in this incident in a building in the Palm